What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Sean O'Malley isn't buying Islam Makhachev's hype. Next month, Team Khabib protege Islam Makhachev will step into the octagon to square off against Charles Oliveira in a bout for the vacant lightweight title. Ahead of the fight, hot prospect Sean O'Malley isn't too sold on Islam Makhachev's hype. During a recent interview with Helen Yee, O'Malley explained why he isn't sold on Makhachev's hype. The way he sees it, although he performed well in his recent fights, most of his hype stems from his relationship with Khabib Nurmagomedov.
It's crazy how hyped up he is, literally because Khabib says how good he is. I mean, obviously he's went out there and competed and performed really well in his last couple fights too, but we're so excited about this guy. A lot of the reason is because Khabib says how good he is, and people in the training room and stuff too, which is rare. We're not super hyped because of all the crazy performances he's had. It's more so just because Khabib thinks this guy's the best in the world. And I would love to see Charles go out there and get the job done.
Currently, Makhachev is the betting favorite in the fight, a position that he's held since the bout was announced. Considering the fact that this fight will be the first top 10 opponent Makhachev will have fought, the odds are somewhat surprising. Of course, the title fight comes in the midst of a 10-fight win streak by the Dagestani fighter that most recently saw him pick up a dominant TKO win over Bobby Green earlier this year. Standing in his way of capturing UFC gold, however, is Charles Oliveira, the uncrowned champion at 155 pounds. After being stripped of the belt by the Arizona State Athletic Commission, Oliveira went on to defeat Justin Gaethje in the main event of UFC 274 to earn his 11th straight win. With the eyes of the MMA community on Abu Dhabi come October 22nd, only time will tell if Makhachev is in fact the future of the lightweight division, or if Oliveira will continue to reign atop the 155-pound ladder. Michael Bisping questions Kevin Holland's retirement. The MMA community was stunned this week when Kevin Holland announced via Instagram that he would be retiring from fighting. The announcement came on the heels of a one-sided loss to Khamzat Chimaev that saw the fan-favorite fighter reportedly secure a considerable bag for taking the short-notice fight. Although Holland seems content to walk away from the sport, former middleweight champion Michael Bisping has his doubts. The 2019 Hall of Fame inductee spoke on his Believe You Me podcast to call Holland out for his retirement, saying,
Harrington, that's bull. That's bull. Kevin Holland's a great fighter. He's very, very well known. He was the 2020 Fighter of the Year, as you just said. He's a fan favorite. He's making money. He loves shiny things. I'm talking about gold and jewelry and stuff like that. And he wants to buy a lot of it more. And he's in the prime of his life. If he was quitting, walking away, he would at least, jazz it up a little touch, as opposed to using a font last seen on an Atari game system.
The announcement from Holland was completely unexpected, especially for a fighter who likes to remain active. After winning his Dana White Contender Series bout in 2018, Holland has joined the UFC and took on an incredibly strong schedule. After rattling off 5 straight wins in 2020, Holland found himself fighting the best the middleweight division had to offer. When he faced the best the middleweight division had to offer, Holland dropped back-to-back losses in 2021. This year, Holland returned to the win column, bouncing back at welterweight with 2 wins this year before dropping the recent short-notice loss to Chimaev. Do you think Holland is truly tired? Or is his return to the octagon inevitable? Give us your thoughts in the comment section down below. Next up, George St-Pierre believes Jon Jones will be just as dominant at heavyweight. Jon Jones' heavyweight move has been a long time coming. After defending his belt in early 2020 against Dominic Reyes, Jones sought a payday from the UFC. In the midst of stalled negotiations the following summer, the consensus pound-for-pound kingpin relinquished his coveted 205-pound title. Over the next 2 years, Jones would continue to transform his body with the goal of an eventual heavyweight move. Despite that, there has been no official news about Jones' move to heavyweight. With fans growing impatient, some have begun to question how good the arguable GOAT will look after such a lengthy layoff. One man who has no doubts about Jones' abilities in the UFC is Hall of Famer George St-Pierre. The former 2-division champion spoke at a recent Q&A about Jones' move to heavyweight, saying,
"It will be interesting how he will adapt to heavyweight. I'm confident that after a long layoff, Jon Jones has all the skills to come back like he was when he had his reign at light heavyweight. And I just don't know how it's gonna play out."
With the top of the heavyweight division as crowded as it is presently, there's a chance that Jones may not just walk right into a title fight. As heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou recovers from knee surgery, talks of an interim title fight have emerged. Whether or not the promotion opts to create a heavyweight title fight with Jones involved or waits to match Ngannou up with another contender largely depends on the return timeline presented by the champion's team. If there's one thing fight fans have learned about Jones in recent years, is that he's going to be patient. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Scott Coker clarifies status of Nate Diaz negotiations. Recently, Bellator MMA president Scott Coker revealed in an impromptu Q&A that the promotion was in contact with Nate Diaz regarding a potential contract. Although fans began to speculate as to whether or not the Stockton superstar was going to be Bellator bound, it sounds as though there's one slight hiccup. As we pointed out previously, there is a 3-month waiting period that begins at the end of a contract. During that 90-day period, fighters are considered restricted free agents and are unable to negotiate with outside promotions. Although the UFC has waived the 3-month waiting period for fighters like Jose Aldo in the past, the promotion doesn't seem to be willing to offer Diaz the same courtesy. After Bellator 285, Coker set the record straight in regards to the status of negotiations with Nate Diaz, saying,
My guys reached out to their management, and the manager came back and said, look, he still has an exclusive negotiation period. And so, let's see how that plays out.
On the heels of Diaz's impressive 4th-round win over Tony Ferguson, there's no shortage of opportunities for the Ultimate Fighter Season 5 winner. Currently, Diaz is entertaining offers from the WWE and bare knuckle boxing, while also setting his sights on a potential boxing match with Jake Paul, depending on how Paul's boxing match with Anderson Silva goes. For Diaz, a short-term contract with Bellator could fuel some exciting fights. With former opponent Benson Henderson on the roster, in addition to fighters like Michael Venom Page, Diaz could remain active in MMA before making his promised return to the UFC. With no shortage of opportunities for Diaz, we now turn to you. What do you want the Stockton superstar's first move outside of the UFC to be? Give us your thoughts in the comment section down below. And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have a UFC fighter announcing a big money move. A UFC fighter, Mike Davis, announced in a tweet that he will be offering a cornering spot to his fight for $10,000. He also mentioned that you'll be getting better seats than UFC president Dana White. A fan asked why the fighter was doing this, to which Mike Davis responded, "It would cover my entire camp, every penny. The food, the PT, the adjustments, the gear, the transportation, the medicals, the therapy, the flight, and passes and everything else. It would cover my whole camp." As of right now, the UFC and Dana White haven't said anything to him, but do you think they will allow this? If they do, this could be a huge possibility for the fighters, but a problem for the UFC since they won't get a cut of the deal. Last up, UFC President Dana White opens up on meeting with Mortality expert. UFC President Dana White keeps up with an insane schedule. The UFC boss has remained one of the busiest men in sports in recent years, taking few holiday vacations while handling his duties for the organization. During a recent episode of the Action Junkies podcast, White spoke with UFC veteran Jake Ellenberger about a recent appointment he had with a mortality expert. Over the course of the appointment, the alleged expert took DNA samples from White's cheek and samples of his blood before coming to the conclusion that the UFC president had just over 10 years to live by his estimates. The prediction scared White straight and prompted him to make big changes in his life.
I did everything he said to the letter. I lost 30 pounds. My legs were so f***ed up 13 weeks ago, I couldn't tie my shoes. I couldn't bend over to tie my shoes because my legs were I could barely walk some days. No more sleep apnea. I don't snore anymore.
Dude,
everything is gone in 10 weeks.
Some fight fans may recall many years ago, White battled Meniere's disease, a debilitating condition that used to have a profound impact on the UFC president's life. In one instance, White was forced to miss a UFC event due to a Meniere's episode. Fortunately, thanks to MLB great Alex Rodriguez, White learned about a procedure called orthokene. The procedure was highly touted by athletes like Kobe Bryant, who used it to help return from an Achilles tear late in his career. After traveling to Germany, White was cured of Meniere's and hasn't had a problem since. Fortunately for the UFC president, it sounds like his recent ailments are behind him. Hopefully that means the estimate given to him by the mortality expert begins to improve as well. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.